We are setting ourselves up for the next pandemic, and we haven't even solved COVID. This is mind-boggling. Check it out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Tanya Sanerib is on the line with us. She is an international legal director and senior attorney with the Center for Biological Diversity, and the biologicaldiversity.org is the website, and Center for BioDIV is the Twitter handle, and the lead author on a new report, America's Massive Wildlife Imports Fuel Global Pandemic Risks. Tanya, welcome to the program. Tell us about this.
Thank you so much for having me. Well, the main point here, Thom, is guess what? The U.S. is a big part of the problem when we look at pandemic risk worldwide. We take up 20% of the global wildlife trade. And I don't think most people realize that.
20% of the global wildlife? I don't think the average person has any idea about this. This isn't big game hunter. I mean, what is this? How do we end up with that?
Right. So our report looked specifically at three kinds of animals. We looked at bats, rodents, and primates. Why did we look at those guys? Well, they are the animals that right now, of all the zoonotic viruses that we know about, and these are just the known ones, these species harbor 75% of those viruses. So when we're thinking about future disease risk, these types of animals, they're a big player. And it turns out the U.S. over a recent 5-year period imported over 20 million parts, products, bodies, skins, jewelry, blood samples, you name it, from bats, primates, and rodents.
Wow. And bats brought us SARS and COVID, and rodents brought us the bubonic plague, via their fleas. And I'm assuming other diseases, there's a virus down in the Southwest that rodents spread through their urine. And then primates, of course, brought us HIV, AIDS. I'm sure there's other diseases.
Absolutely, absolutely. But one of the really interesting things that we found in this report and doing this analysis is the majority of those imports into the U.S., there are dead animals. We do some amount of live trade in bats and rodents and primates, absolutely, but the vast majority of our imports are dead. And that means that the U.S., while our disease risk isn't that high because dead specimens aren't as risky as live animals are, it means that we're outsourcing our disease risk. And so we analyzed the top 5 exporting countries for all 3, bats, rodents, and primates. And guess what? China made the list for all 3. And that means that, we've been pointing our finger at China saying they're the problem here for this disease. But in fact, U.S. consumer demand is a part of the problem. We have demand for bats, rodents, primates. They're all coming from China and other global hotspots around the world. So we can't just point our fingers at other countries. That was one of the things that really leapt out at me. The other part of the analysis we did is we looked at why are we bringing these animals across our border. And it turns out commercial demand, so things that people buy at stores, they made the top 3 reasons. So it's commercial demand, scientific research, biomedical research. Those are the top 3 reasons. And so for us as consumers, we're importing bats encased in acrylic for paperweights, primate skulls and skeletons to decorate our homes, and rodent fur for fishing flies.
Really? Wow, for fishing flies. That's amazing.
Basically, trinkets. We're looking for trinkets, and that's what's fueling our demand for the wildlife, and that's a huge problem from a disease risk standpoint. It's also a big problem, though, for the biodiversity crisis.
Right. So essentially what we're doing is we're going to poorer countries around the world and we're saying, go into your most pristine habitats, go into the areas where humans don't normally go, and acquire these animals so that you can sell them to us and we will give you money. And then when those people are interacting with those animals, they get diseases. And ultimately, those diseases can go worldwide, as we've seen with everything from HIV to SARS to COVID. And geez, what a mess! Is there? What's the solution to this, Tanya? Is it legislative? Is it cultural? What do we do about this?
All of the above, definitely. So I think the first thing, the most important thing that the U.S. needs to do, and this is true for the U.S. and other big consumer markets, the EU, China, Japan, we are the main consumers of wildlife around the world. We need to throw up trade moratoria. We need to put in place a ban and say we're drawing down U.S. demand. So that's the first thing that we have to do. Obviously, that's going to have ripple effects around the world. So we need to have funding for transitions of livelihoods away from the wildlife trade to other professions. And then the other key thing is that we have to work on conservation of biodiversity. We're in the midst of an extinction crisis globally. The U.S. needs to refocus our priorities and ensure that we're leading in this quest to conserve nature. It's a lot. It's a lot we have to tackle. But if you listen to the scientists, what they're saying is we have to transform our entire relationship with nature. And that starts with the wildlife trade ban.
Do you have any champions in Congress?
Well, interestingly, just yesterday, a bill was introduced by Cornyn and Booker, and it's a great start. Basically, what it does is it would end wildlife markets in the U.S. It provides a lot of funding for the U.S. to work globally, not just on getting rid of wildlife markets, but also on conserving nature, which I just said is really crucially important, enforcing wildlife laws. And then it would restrict U.S. imports and exports of live wildlife, just terrestrial species, for food and for medicine. So it's a really good first start, but I think that we have a lot more work to do.
Yeah, that's remarkable. That's John Cornyn of Texas and Cory Booker of New Jersey?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, oh, good guys. I mean, I'm not a big fan of John Cornyn, but, you know, I'm glad he co-sponsored this. Tanya, it's an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. And I'm assuming people can get all the information they need about this over at biologicaldiversity.org, your organization.
That's absolutely right.